So, are we live? I guess we are. Hey everybody, how you doing this evening? I almost said this afternoon because we're so used to doing our classes in the afternoon. But this evening, so how's everybody doing? This is an exciting evening. We're doing a free class and on one of my favorite subjects of all time, which is tomato pies. So we'll get into that in just a minute. We're going to dive right into the recipe. But first, like we always do during our classes, please introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to know who's here, where you're from. It's nice for the other class attendees to know where you're from. A special shout out to you this week if you're from the South, because we're talking about a Southern tradition here, Southern tomato pie. While you're at it, if you have a strong opinion about this, tell me whether you're a Duke's mayonnaise fan or a Hellmann's mayonnaise fan. Down here in the South, everybody crows about Duke's mayonnaise, but like I said in my video, I'm a Yankee. I have never. It's not that I don't like Duke's mayonnaise. And mayonnaise, by the way, I should probably say that mayonnaise is a major ingredient in our tomato pie. But everybody down here in the South crows about it. I've never sort of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, because I was born and raised a Hellmann's guy too. So if you have strong feelings about Hellmann's or Duke's, let us know and duke it out in the so to speak in the comments. We'd love to know what you're into. So if you're not familiar with tomato pie, it's sort of the, well, first of all, it's good old Southern country cooking or down home country cooking. It's not a dish for the most part that you're going to find in say fancy restaurants, or you'll find it in restaurants, but more in the diners and the everyday restaurants than you will in fancy restaurants, because it's not a fancy dish. It's just sort of a down-home dish, and I sometimes liken it to a pizza, because the layering is very similar. You don't have a bread dough. You don't have a dough underneath. You have a pastry dough underneath. That's your bottom layer, and then on top of that you have layers of tomato, not tomato sauce. And then you have this creamy, cheesy layer on top. So it has a lot in common with pizza. So that's kind of cool there. So take a quick break here, and Bev will, by the way, when I say Bev or Sweetie, I'm referring to the pretty gal sitting right here to my right. She's my wife, Bev, and she handles all the behind-the-scenes stuff with the camera angles. She switches the cameras when during the broadcast, and she's the one who's answering. If you get a message from me, it's not from me. I can't do two things at once. I can't bake and type too. But Bev's over there. She'll handle some questions. One thing that would help is to more or less try to limit your questions to what we're doing here this evening. And also, it's fine if you want to chat and with other people and stuff like that. But if you have this will help Bev. If you have a germane question, just put a Q in front of it, and that'll alert Bev to we actually have a question, and it's not just a chat with somebody or just a comment. But feel free to make comments. Anything like that. That's fine. That's why we have that comment section over there. So. It's a pleasure. I'm just going to take a minute here to tell you why I'm doing this class. As you know, we do regular classes every month. Those are paid classes, but on occasion I want to do these free classes because I want everybody in our baking community to be able to have a taste, so to speak, now and then of our classes. And so if I can do an occasional class like this, I will. And this is actually, as I said in my email, this is like a prequel to a class we have coming up on Sunday, which is going to go even deeper into tomato pies. We're going to play around with cherry tomato pies, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And that'll be like our usual classes that are about 2 hours long. So what's next, sweetie? What are we going to do here? I wanted to remind you that this is really the time of year to do this dish, because summer's coming to an end. Before you know it, you're going to wink, and those gorgeous red ripe tomatoes you've been seeing at markets and your farm stands everywhere, they're going to go away, and they'll be probably replaced with a lot of green tomatoes, if any tomatoes at all. And as I'll show you in a minute, with our tomatoes, you really need really red, juicy tomatoes to make this happen. That's where all the magic is. That's where all the flavor is. Once you get, I can't pretend that I've never made tomato pie in the off season, like in the winter time with, crappy, tomatoes that come in from God knows where they're growing them. I have made it, but it's kind of a stretch, and it's never quite the same as making it with summer tomatoes. So I said I would dive right in this evening, so we're going to be true to my word. We are going to dive right in. I'll check in real quick with Bev here and see if there's anything she wants to tell me, anything coming in the chat. Do we have a Duke out?
Well, some cannot get Dukes. Let's see here, we've got.
Is there a comment you could put up on the screen? Maybe one? No. Bev is telling me that for a lot of you, and probably those of you out west, it's probably hard to get Duke's mayonnaise. And by the way, Duke's mayonnaise has a reputation for being a little bit tangier than Hellmann's mayonnaise, having a little bit more of an edge. It's also the one mayonnaise I understand that's not made. It has no added sugar in it whatsoever. In Hellmann's, it has a different sort of edge to it. It's more a lemony edge, I think, and you can't really taste the sugar, but evidently there's sugar in Hellmann's mayonnaise, and that's kind of the long and short of it. Although if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Dukes fan, you could probably go on and on about why you love it.
Okay, so we have people from the West Coast, Australia.
Oh, we have somebody
Ontario.
here from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And where is it?
Ontario.
Ontario. Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
We love having folks from other countries, and it just makes us more cool. We're a cool baking community.
And one of the ladies said that the tomatoes right now are great in Michigan.
Oh, well, someone from Michigan said the tomatoes are great there right now. That's great to hear, and that's probably pretty much most of the country right now. The tomatoes are really, really fabulous. So this is the time to do it. So
I do have one question though before you start.
Can you post it?
Mm-hmm, I can.
All right. We have a question.
Okay, Deborah wants to know, she says, I see the recipe calls for medium to large tomatoes.
Yeah.
I have a ton of cherry tomatoes.
Oh.
Can they be substituted?
Okay. Not really. I mean, if the cherry tomatoes might be able to be substituted for this, I'm sure there's a way you could do it. It's really not something I could get into right now, but if you'll send me an email, I'll sort of sketch it out for you. But that's a very good question. But I need to think about it, just what sort of adjustments you would make if you did use cherry tomatoes. So send me an email tomorrow with that question. I'll be happy to answer that. That's great. Who was that, sweetie?
Deborah.
Deborah wanted to know that. So I think what we'll do here is we will, like I said, dive right into the recipe. I'm going to tidy up here, just move some things aside. And what I'll do is I'll have Bev play a video for you just this week again. Sometimes I love to give pies away. It's just a lot of fun. We give a lot of pies away, but I've started using. I did a video about this, a couple of years ago. It's been very popular actually, about using aluminum, disposable foil aluminum pans to give pies away. And But this week I'm in a situation where I've sent pies out in my better pie pans, and I sort of regret it because I'm having to chase down pie pans. But this is what's going to happen. This is what sometimes will happen to people if they don't return my pie pans. So fair warning if you're somebody out there who gets pies from me. So Bev's going to play this. It's just like a 23-second video to give me a second to clear the table off here. So you've been warned. I'm telling you. if I give you a pie in one of my nice pie pans, you better return it, or I'll be sitting on your front steps.
Okay, I do have a question.
You want to post it? Bev has a question.
He likes to bake tomato pies now and freeze a few for the winter. Is this advisable?
Somebody wants to know about freezing pies in general. Those of you who come to my classes regularly know that freezing is not really something, in generally speaking, that I like to do with pies. I prefer to eat what I can, maybe give them away, the rest away. But because it doesn't have a top crust, freezing with top crust never works out very well because the top crust traps all that moisture well after it's wrapped up and in the freezer. So it would do better than many pies would. So I would give it a provisional thumbs up on the idea of freezing the pie after it's baked. So what I think we'll do now, what's that?
Are you going to talk about any of the pie pans that you like?
Yeah, I'll be talking, if there's a question about pie pans, somebody wanted to know. Yes, I will be talking about pie pans in just a minute.
Okay.
But I think what we'll do is let's roll the crust out, roll the dough out. It's a dough before you bake it, and then it's a crust. So what I'm going to do is I have a disc here, and as you know, if you read my emails that came with your links, we're not going to actually make the dough now. What we're going to do is, and because I gave you the recipe for that, and I also gave you an entire hour-long class that you can look at. Some of you probably came to that shows you all about how we make this. So let's just go ahead and dive into this. We'll get this rolled out and into the pan, and that'll at least get us started. So this dough, I made this dough last night. This is the dough that you got the recipe for. It's the all butter food processor dough. And this is my go-to dough. I use it for 95 or 90% of my pies, sweet and savory. When I do make variations of this, it's usually to add a little bit of, or substitute a little bit of Crisco for some of the butter, or perhaps use a little whole wheat flour in place of the bleached flour, the all-purpose flour. One variation I like, especially with tomato pie, is using some cornmeal in the crust. If you have any of my pie books, Pie Academy, or Savory Dinner Pies, you'll see crusts that use, in all those books, that use some cornmeal. So look for those, because that's a very nice addition to this tomato pie. So if any of you don't have one of these, this is my proprietary Pie Academy rolling pin. This is a French style pin, and I use this a lot when I start doughs because they're often kind of cool or cold and a little bit hard to roll, and this pin allows you a lot of direct leverage on the dough. But once I get it, I don't know, usually about 8-9 inches, I'll switch to my other pin. my big bakery pen here and finish it off. And what we're shooting for now is about a 13-inch circle, because we got a pretty big pie pan we're going to put this in. Notice when I roll, I'm only rolling in a couple of directions. I'm sticking to about noon and about 2 o'clock. And then after I do those 2 strokes, there's a lot of different ways to roll dough, and many of them work. But I usually don't do this and go in all different directions. I like to just go in a couple of directions, and each time I stroke the dough like that, after every couple of strokes, I sort of maneuver my fingers under the dough to make sure it's not sticking. It's a shame to roll out a nice dough that you've made and to find out that it's kind of laminated to your rolling surface. Let me get just a little bit more flour on here. There we go. I did exactly what I just said I usually don't do. But I'm trying to get it to a nice 13. I'm about 13 inches now, and I'm going to take out my trusty ruler to check this. And we're up to about 14, and that 13 and a half there, 13 and a half. And that's good because we're going to need, I have a fairly big pan here. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. For this particular pie, you really do need a good-sized pan. You can scale the recipe back a little bit and use something smaller, but generally speaking, I like a wider pan, one that has a lot of surface area and a pretty nice depth. This one has about 2 inches on it. And this is not my favorite pan, but I do like certain things about it. It's Pyrex. I like the size that I just showed you. And one of the things I really like about it, we all know how difficult it can be sometimes to get hot pies out of the oven or a pie into the oven. And this has a really nice wide rim on it. It's one of the best features of this pan. I think it might be called an Easy Grab or something like that. But if you ever see one of these at Target or someplace like that, it might be worth picking one up. So let's just brush this excess flour off and get a little bit more off here. And let's get that into our pan. Now, one thing you want to do whenever you're putting your dough in your pan, you want to get it kind of lined up before you start unfolding it. You know, I can tell that this is in here nice and evenly. It's really right down the center of the pan. So now I'm going to unfold it, and I won't have to do a lot of adjusting now. Everything is sort of where it's supposed to be. Now what I'm going to do, I'll turn this edge back the way that I like to do with my pie crust. And then what we would typically do, and it's in your recipe there, we would refrigerate this dough, because I like to refrigerate it before I pre-bake it. And I'm not going to go into partially, I do talk about partially pre-baking the shell, and I have a recipe I'm going to send you. The day after class, I always like to send out an updated link page with some new goodies in it. So tomorrow I'm going to be sending out your updated link page with some new stuff in it. And one of the things I'm going to have in there is a video that shows you right in the middle of it. Actually, the video is for a chocolate chess pie, but right in the middle of it, there's a really good segment on how to pre-bake your crust, partially pre-bake it. And that way I don't have to spend a lot of time on that right now. But pre-baking is an essential part of this recipe. I have on occasion, and sometimes still do, not pre-bake it, but it really makes a huge difference when you partially pre-bake the shell. It makes it crusty. It helps make it more impervious to the liquid that comes out of the tomatoes, because tomatoes are juicy. They let go with a lot of juice. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So you do want to do anything you can to crispen up that crust before you assemble the pie. And the way we do that is by pre-baking, partially pre-baking the crust. So what I would do now is I would take my, if I was proceeding with this particular dough, I'd take my pastry fork here. That's to let steam out when you pre-bake it. Then this goes in the fridge right like this. It gets nice and cold and solid, maybe 30 or 40 minutes. Then I would put the foil in it so it fits like a glove, and then the beans. I weigh it all down. Then it goes in a 375 degree oven for about 25 minutes. And I take out the beans and foil and give it about 10 more minutes. And that's just long enough to crispen up the crust a bit and firm it up so the juice isn't problematic. So that's that. We're going to keep moving because we're doing great. We're moving right along. Sweetie, what's coming in? Do you have a question you want to fire at me?
I do. Sharon says that she slow oven roast / dry plum tomatoes in the summer and freezes them. Would they be good to add to the tomatoes that she bought in the winter to help boost the flavor?
Yeah. So the question is, can you
plum tomatoes
Yeah.
that she bought in the summer?
Yeah.
She freezes them,
Yeah.
dries them.
Right. Oh, and she wants to use those in with the other mushrooms other tomatoes in the winter.
Yes.
To help boost the flavor. Yeah, that's a great idea. Who was that, sweetie?
Sharon.
Sharon, that's a great idea. I like the way you're thinking there. You're sort of taking the blandness of winter tomatoes and sort of upping the flavor profile by using tomatoes that you roasted, plum tomatoes that you roasted in the summer. You're my kind of cook. That's really thinking. I like that a lot. So anyway, so let's imagine that. Let me bring in one of the stars of the show here. So let's imagine that I have pre-baked this, and try to imagine that I did it in a cast iron skillet. I do have cast iron pie pans, and I have a ton of other pie pans. But instead of using any of those for the pie shell that we're going to assemble this in, I actually used this cast iron skillet. One of the reasons I did it is because I just think I love doing pies in skillets. I think it has such a nice rustic look and personality about it. So that's why I did it in here. So the one we're going to assemble in a few minutes, we're going to do right in here. So that'll be a lot of fun. But when you pre-bake this, one of the things you're going to see, okay, so like I said, you'll take the foil and beans out after about 25 minutes and put it back in for about 10. And one of the telltale signs that your crust is partially pre-baked nicely is you're going to get a little, I don't know if you can see, let me raise this up. I think you're going to get, you can see there that you're going to get some nice golden browning around this top edge, and that's kind of cool. The one drawback to a pan like this, it has no edge on it, so I couldn't really take and plunk the edge down on here, and it would hold a little bit better. When you have straight sides like on a skillet like this, there's nothing for the crust, the pastry to really latch onto, so you can see it all sort of came in from the sides of the pan. But that's okay, that's cool. We'll do just fine. So anyway, we'll put these guys aside. And what do I have here, sweetie? Okay, so I did talk about pre-baking. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a little, one more short little video I want to show you this evening while I'm tidying up here and getting ready for the next step. And as you probably know from my emails, we're doing a special class in September, sometime just in the middle of September. And it's going to be all about one of my favorite subjects, which is fall coffee cakes. You know, imagine a nice buttery, golden, streusely, confectioner, sugar glazy, fall coffee cakes. And they're so nice to have in the fall too, because the weather, you know, with that nice cool weather, you feel like baking more, and people seem to be getting together for different things, whether it's, you know, hikes or going to a, you know, a cider mill or something like that. And having these coffee cakes is just such a nice thing. So we're having a special class about them in the middle of September, and it's going to be a paid class. It's you know, like a lot of our classes, $49. But if you purchase either our August bundle of classes, we've already had one of those, or our September bundle of classes, which we have a really nice group of classes we're doing in September, you get this class for free. It'll be complimentary to you. So anyway, I just took some beauty shots of two of the coffee cakes we're doing, and I set it to music. And while I'm tidying up here, I'm going to have Bev play that for you. It's just a minute, so stick around. So what do you think? They look pretty good, huh? Good enough to eat. And trust me, they are. We've got a freezer full of them right now because, as everybody knows who takes my classes, I get a little bit obsessive about testing recipes, obsessed about it, and I test and test and test until and Beth thinks I'm nuts because I've been writing cookbooks since I was in my 20s, and and she thinks I'm nuts to. She'll say, "You know how to do that? What are you doing that for? Is that practicing or testing?" So I test and test until I got freezers full of coffee cakes. But I just thought you might like to have a look at those. So hope you enjoyed that little video. So why don't you switch the overhead, sweetie, and we'll start talking about tomatoes. Before I forget to say this, notice the. I think you can probably notice it in this light. Look at the different, these tomatoes here are definitely redder than these and riper. They were in better shape. I thought I had timed these better. If I had let these sit for another couple of days, it probably would have gotten a little bit redder and sweeter. But basically these are our tomatoes that I have laid out here. These slices are about a generous quarter of an inch thick. Can I put that in the side camera, sweetie, and see if maybe you'll be able to tell better. This is about a quarter-inch thick, a generous quarter, maybe to a third. And that's how thick I like to slice them. For this particular pie. So what I do is I take the tomatoes. Let me show you what I do. And first thing I'll do is you need about 2 pounds of tomatoes, give or take just a hair. If you're doing a big pie like we are, 2 pounds is what you'll need. If you're scaling the recipe down, 1.5 pounds would probably be plenty. That would be about 2 pounds is like 4 medium, about 4 of these. You can see it fits, in the palm of my hand like that. 4 of those is 2 pounds. So you would need, if you were scaling the recipe down, about 3 of those would be just about right. So what I like to do is, I think I forgot my other good knife. Well, anyway, that's okay. I just sharpened this one too. So what I'll do is I'll take and I cut these I left one uncut so I could show you what I do. It helps to have a really nice sharp knife. A lot of you probably use a serrated knife for this job, and that's good too. So I cut it into these nice 1/4 inch thick slices. And I'll do another one. So after we do that, and before we set them aside, one thing I like to do, you know, is when you do tomato pie, it's sort of a cat and mouse game with the moisture. You want some moisture in there, but you don't want too much. Otherwise, the pie gets too watery, too juicy. So what I often do is I'll take and knock out some of this juice here, some of the seeds. They call that the jelly. So I'll knock some of that out on maybe every other slice or something like that. I don't get you know, crazy about it. I just knock some of it out, like so. And do a last couple here. I'll set this aside. And then what you want to do, because there's a lot of tomatoes in this pie, so what you want to do is salt the tomatoes, and that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to help give them better flavor if you salt them, and then it's also going, I got to find my salt, and it's also going to help draw the moisture out. So what you would do, and this is perfect time to use kosher salt. You know, chefs like kosher salt because it has this finger feel. You can get a good idea of the amount that's going down when you grab kosher salt. With fine table salt, you just don't get the same effect. It's just harder to know how much you're putting down. So anyway, that goes down like that. Normally what I'll do then is I'll wait about 15-20 minutes, and then I'll blot all the juices off like so, and then I'll actually turn them over and do them on the other side too, very lightly, but just to help draw out the moisture as much as possible. But again, it's like I said, it's kind of a cat and mouse game. You don't want to get all the moisture out because you need some moisture in the pie. So that's what we do with our tomatoes. So we can set those aside for a few minutes. And if you were doing this ahead, you could actually do that. You could do that the night ahead. That would be fine too. And then just stick them back in your fridge. I know a lot of times people are looking to do some of the work ahead of time. Of course, you could pre-bake the crust ahead of time too. Do we have a question or two you want to throw at me, sweetie?
No,
Or not?
that's a couple.
Okay. All
I
righty.
love the coffee cake.
Oh, good, good. So let's talk about some of our other ingredients here that's going in the pie. One thing we're going to put in is some scallions. I like to put about 4 or 5 nice scallions in there. And if you're using scallions, I know the typical thing you see with directions for scallions, they tell you to use all the white and the light green area. That's typically when you're using scallions, and that's fine. That's what we'll use in our pie too. But that also, provided it's in good shape, it also leaves you with all this good stuff. And even though I might not put this in a salad or use it in a raw situation, I would chop this up and saute it and use it into a soup or a saute or something like that. There's no use throwing away all this good green stuff right here. So just keep that in mind when you're cooking with scallions, okay? So what we'll do is we're gonna slice these scallions very thin. And scallions are nice in here. One of the recipes that I tried for the tomato pie, instead of using scallions, I actually sauteed a very large onion in some butter. And I did that for one of the trials that I did this past week. And to tell you the truth, both Bev and I really like this one better with the scallions in it. So that's the way we're going to make it tonight. So in addition to the scallions, let's add some parsley. Okay, I have some parsley here. This was cleaned earlier, and I like a lot of parsley. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to break it off here where the stems meet the leaves. Just give it a little twist. And I know you're thinking, oh, there must be some big stems in there. Those stems aren't going to, they're going to taste kind of firm in the mouth. But what I'll do is I'll just sort of gather everything up tightly, and then just really, really work, finely down here to get this stuff chopped up as fine as possible. And just note that whenever I cut, my fingertips, you probably know this, your fingertips have to be curled under. That way there's no chance of cutting your fingertips off. Your knife blade itself, can knock into your knuckle, but as long as your fingertips are protected, you're fine, okay? I always think when I give advice like that, it's like famous last words, just waiting for the cut to come,
I do have a question.
Okay, fire away. We have a question.
Pat wants to know if you pre-bake the crust ahead of time, do you refrigerate it or leave it on the counter?
If you pre-bake the crust, do you refrigerate it after it's baked? Yeah. Well, it depends when you're going to use it. For the most part, if it's within 24 hours, I'll just leave it out. I may cover it with a piece of plastic overnight or something like that. But for the most part, I'll just leave it out. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we are looking for here is someplace to put this good stuff. So I think I'll use my pie pan. This is one of my favorite pie pans. This is my USA pan. I had something else to put all this good stuff in, but I can't find it. So we're pushing forward with 35 minutes here, and of course I'm running a little behind, but that's okay. If you have to leave, don't forget that I will be sending out the replay. So if you need to start watching Downton Abbey or whatever, that's fine. I'll understand. Especially if it's Downton Abbey. That's one that Bev and I love. Okay, so that's another part of our assembly. And let's tell you what, let's move on and make, Bev has a question for me?
No, it's just
Okay.
ingredients.
Since we've already cut those things up, let's go ahead and make the cheese topping. That'll come together quickly, and then we'll have most of the elements all ready to assemble. So first thing I'll do is I'll bring over my bowl full of soft cream cheese. Well, not exactly full. There's only 2 or 3 ounces of cream cheese in there. So what I'm going to do is and then it's nice and soft too. And this is part of the creamy topping for the pie. Some recipes for Southern tomato pie use a lot of cream cheese, and almost like a half cream cheese and half mayonnaise mixed. And they add other types of ingredients that you would add to make pimento cheese. They sort of make it like a pimento cheese topping, which is really good too. There's another way to do it. So here's my 3/4 cup of Hellmann's, not Duke's, Hellmann's mayonnaise. And we'll stir that in. Another thing that's really nice in here, Bev and I both, when we tasted the last one, we said, whoa, that's got a nice kick to it. I think I must have added a little bit more cayenne than usual. So far, look at the recipe. You'll see the heading where it says cheese topping. So in here now we have the 3 ounces of cream cheese softened. We've got the mayonnaise, 3/4 cup mayonnaise. I'm going to add the Worcestershire sauce next, but right now I've got this in my hand, and this is the cayenne. So we're just going to add a little bit of cayenne, and then about a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. That goes in next. And some of those things are things you would find in pimento cheese. So that's all the creamy stuff. Now we're going to add the cheese to it, and this is about 1.5 to 2 cups of grated cheddar right here. And we've made this with, I'm going to put that in that count. We've made this with different cheeses. We made it with the white cheddars and everything else. But it seems to me like more authentic for some reason when it's the orange cheddar cheese. So that's what this is. This is orange cheddar cheese. I mixed just a little Parmesan in there so it wouldn't clump together while we were waiting to get started. That's a lot. Okay. And this is what's going to get spread all over the top of our tomato pie. Now you could get fancy, which is a mistake to begin with because this is not a fancy dish, but you could add garlic, that's fair game. You could add some other seasonings. I've added smoked paprika, to the topping, but all those are sort of like gilding the lily. You really don't need much more than what I have in here already. So that's our topping right there. So we've got our topping, we've got our nice additives there. Let's bring this guy back. We're going to need him. And let's find a couple of other things here that we're going to need. Going to need some.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, Bev says there's a question pending, so let's hear it.
Okay, so Deborah doesn't usually use mayonnaise. She says it's too unhealthy for her.
Yeah.
Can that amount be reduced or even left out entirely? Or substituted with something?
Well, you know what, Deborah, that's Deborah you said? Wants to know about substituting mayonnaise. I mean, I'd have to think about it. It's really, there's probably a non-traditional, substitute that you could use. Maybe you would try, I don't know if you could use one of those vegan mayonnaises that you can find at Whole Foods or a place like that. That might be a good choice. And those probably have a more cardiologist-approved nutritional profile. So that's really the best thing I can recommend right now. All the other things I can think of that might work, more cream cheese, mascarpone cheese or something like that, they're all, rich. They have probably the same issues that you're concerned about with mayonnaise. But let me think about it. Excuse me?
What about sour cream?
Sour cream, same thing. Sour cream, very, rich dairy product is, relatively high in fat, so it's probably going to be the same issue. But sour cream, you could play around with sour cream. It's probably, you might want to bind it with a little bit of flour, a tablespoon of flour if you do that, because it's liable to break without it.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
And just
one more question.
Yeah,
here.
one more. Sharon wants to know, do you recommend mild, medium, or sharp cheddar?
Sharon wants to know? I like the sharp cheddar. The sharper the better, in fact. I use sharp tonight, but extra sharp is really the way I like to go. So, yeah, I'm a sharp kind of guy. So anyway, let's assemble this. This will be fun. Overhead camera, sweetie, would be best here. So I'm going to bring our tomatoes back into the picture. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to help protect the bottom of this even more. So let me just give you a little bit of a clue as to where we're at here. So we're sort of on step 4, if you've been following along with the recipe. So we've preheated the, once we've gotten to this point, we definitely want to preheat the oven because we're going to assemble this now, and we don't want the fully assembled pie just sitting there on the counter. We wanted to assemble it and then get it into the oven. So preheat your oven to, we're on step 4, preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And then we're going to take this guy right here, this panko breadcrumbs. You all know what panko is by now. They're real fine, fine coarse, somewhere in there, breadcrumbs that you can find next to your regular breadcrumbs. And what this does is just a little hedge against any moisture dripping down into the pan, onto the crust. So that goes down first. So we're creating this little bit of impervious layer here, which is not totally impervious, it's just sort of a hedge. And then we're going to take about a 1/4 cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and we're going to put that down too. We're going to save about 1/2 cup of that because that's going to go between the tomato layers. And then after that goes down, we're going to start putting our tomatoes down, slightly overlapping rows of tomatoes. So let's start. And I'll notice that I'll overlap them by no more than about half would be the most. And we'll put all those down on the bottom. I'm curious too. Does everybody out there, I mean, has anybody out who's here never had a tomato pie? I'm just curious about that. I never really had, until I moved down south, I really didn't have them, except, for a few times. When I moved down south, I started having a lot of them. So now in the middle, I don't have a piece that'll fit that perfectly. So I'll just drop this guy in there. That'll be fine. So now what we're going to do, after that goes down, so we've got 1 layer of tomatoes, and what we'll do now is put a little pepper down. You might want to not put too much if you've put the cayenne in there. And then this fun little mixture here is a combination of heavy cream and Dijon mustard. It's about 1.5 tablespoons of heavy cream and about 1 tablespoon of mustard.
Oh my.
And what I'm going to do with that, I just mixed, you don't absolutely need the cream like that, but I added the cream. It just makes the mixture a little bit more spreadable, a little bit more viscous. So I'm going to put about half of that down first. If you're thinking, wow, Dijon, mustard and tomatoes, I can tell you it's a match made in heaven. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's really, really good. You've probably had it on sandwiches. So we spread that around. And then we'll take about, you've got 25 things on the table here. Then we'll take about half of our scallion and parsley mixture, and we're going to put that down. The nice thing about, and I think the reason Bev and I both like this one better than the one with the sauteed onions, it just adds such a nice, fresh, vibrant flavor, to have this fresh stuff in there. And then on top of that, this is a little bit more than I need, but on top of that goes about 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, so that's next. I ought to work for the cheese promotion board or something like that. So now we're going to do basically the same thing again. We're going to put down a layer of tomatoes, kind of overlapping. And I'll stick one more in here. And then we'll find this is a really nice slice here, a real red one. We'll drop that guy right in the middle. And then what I sometimes do, if I've got a few extra leftover pieces, I may cut them into quarters or something like that. And I might wedge them in here and there where I see a little bit of a gap, like that's a little bit low right there, and might be able to stick a little bit over here. So just because then I use up those things right there. Otherwise I'd probably end up using them in a sauce. So let's put that aside.
You would not believe how many people have never heard of a tomato pie.
Oh, Bev is saying a lot of you haven't heard of tomato pies or made them before.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. So you're learning something new here. Okay, so let's do the pepper again. And we'll put our little mustard sauce down here. Now you got to promise me that since I was nice enough to do this class, you're going to send me your pictures, because I love to see pictures. One of the things we do at our regular classes that we hold on Sundays, I try to put together a little video of all the pie photos that our classmates send in every month. So they're real good about it, and I hope you will be too. So you got to send me pictures of your tomato pie when they're all done. So then we'll put more of this down. We're going to save a little bit of that for the top. So we'll put that down. I mean, doesn't it look, don't you love all the colors? I mean, I think these colors are, it's exciting just to make this pie because the colors are so beautiful. And then this guy goes on. And what we want to do with our topping is we want to dollop it here and there. Don't try to spread it yet, just dollop it. There's a lot of that, I will say, but once you get it, when you get it all spread out, it doesn't look quite like it's quite so much. It's important that you bring it out from the center. You don't want to have this big buildup of it in the center. So pull it all out right towards the perimeter, and try to get it right up close to the edge. And there you go. That's all there is to it, almost. Now, since I have this, I don't always do it, but since I have some of our nice fresh stuff left, I'll go ahead and put that on top. Make a pretty look with that. And that's all she wrote, folks. Wow, Bev said wow. Let me hear a wow. Anybody else got a wow for me? So that's what it looks like going in the oven. So what you're going to do is, I like to start this down low in the oven. So that gives it that, that puts a lot of heat into the bottom of it, gets those juices and the tomatoes, going. And really, that's really the way to start this, is in the lower part of the oven. And then I'll typically move it up after about 30 minutes at 375. I'll often move it up into the center position, the center rack, and then I'll bake it there for about another 10 or 15 minutes. A lot has to do with what's happening to the top. If the top is browning up nicely in the bottom of the oven, I would probably leave it there the whole time. If I moved it up and then the top started to brown too much, I'd probably move it back down. You got to play with it a little bit. And what you're looking for when the pie is done, the time is the best indicator of when this will be done. But don't be surprised if the top sort of, you'll see movement in the top. It's sort of like, almost like below the cheese surface bubbling. You'll probably be able to see that, and depending on the juiciness of the tomatoes, you may also see juice, a little bit of juice popping up here and there and bubbling here and there. You just don't want to underbake it. If there's one chronic problem I see that a lot of home pie makers make, is stuff is underbaked. With a fruit pie especially, it happens all the time. People don't bake their pies long enough to really get those fruit juices bubbling and thickening. Unless if you're using cornstarch, which is probably a typical one, unless you get those cornstarches, and boil them for at least a minute and a half, they're not going to thicken properly. So just keep that in mind. if you're in doubt on a pie, it probably needs to be a little bit baked a little bit longer. So anyway, I'm gonna.
What size is that pan?
This is I think a 9.5-inch skillet, maybe 10. Yeah, it's a 10-inch skillet, this one is. And like, it's as deep as cast iron skillets typically are, probably about 2.25 inches. So let me move that one aside and grab the other. We'll slice this up and plate up a piece. And that's we have this nice. So as you can see, this one was not quite so brown right here. This, a lot of people say, oh, it's kind of dark around the edge. But you know what? That's fine. It tastes fine. And this edge, you can sacrifice this edge if necessary to make sure that the pie, whatever pie you're baking, is done fully. Because this is such a small amount of pie real estate right here. It doesn't amount to very much. What's more important is what's going on inside the filling, whether it's a savory pie or a sweet pie. That's really what you have to be concerned with, and less concerned with the crust. So let me cut this and plate up a piece, and you can tell me what you think. You can.
And how about using basil and garlic?
Well, you know what? Someone asked about basil and garlic? You want to put that? Do you have that question handy? You can put up on the screen. What is it? Why don't you read me that, sweetie?
Most other recipes you listed use basil. Why the parsley?
Well, again, I just like the fresh flavor of it. Basil, see, parsley is sort of like more Americanized, I would say. As soon as you start getting into, and I've done this before plenty of times, I've made plenty of variations of this with dollops of pesto throughout it. But as soon as you start to do that, and it tastes wonderful, but as soon as you start to do that, you sort of take it in the direction of Italian cooking. And this is down home Southern cooking. So I'm always a little bit cautious about doing something like that. So let me grab my spatula and I'll plate this piece up. Sweetie, why don't you fire up the side camera?
Sorry.
And I'll bring it in for a landing here. There you go. So you can see, got nice tomatoes, our cheese topping. I mean, this is really one delicious pie. Don't make those tomato slices too thick. Try to stick with a quarter inch, like I said, because you make them too thick, the pie is not going to bake as quickly. And you want those tomato slices to soften. And if you make them, if you stick with that quarter inch, they'll soften up nicely after 45 minutes. So that's that. Well, I went almost an hour, so my estimate was off, but I apologize for anybody who wanted to get out of here sooner. But if you did, and just remember that the replay will be available very shortly. I'll put that in with your links that I send out tomorrow. And maybe sweetie, you have a couple of questions I'll field here before we go.
Excuse me. Can you bake it in a convection oven?
You probably could. I have no experience with convection ovens, though.
And is it served cold or hot?
Is tomato pie? Ooh, good point. I should have always served hot. At least I always serve it hot. I don't think it would be nearly as good cold. This actually, you might be able to tell a little bit from the look of the pie. This was baked earlier today. I did warm it up just slightly, before we started, but probably not enough. Anyway, so this one, I'm taking this other one. This guy's going in the oven as soon as we sign off here. Is there one more question you want me to take before we sign off, sweetie? Oh, thank you. Scrumptious is the word. So anyway,
And nice hands.
yeah, thank you. So that's it for our tomato pie recipe. I hope you all learned something new, had a lot of fun, enjoyed it, and it's great to have you as Pie Academy members and to have you in our community. We like I said, we do these classes at least once, and usually twice a month. And if you, not the free ones, but the other ones, the paid ones. So if you ever want to try one of those out and come in, we'd love to have you with us on Sundays. If you're on our mailing list, I always send out information about the classes and reminders and things like that. So think about that, and think about those coffee cakes too, and September coming up. So anyway, this was a lot of fun. I think we're almost at an hour, so I'm going to sign off here. Say thanks again, and Bev, on behalf of Bev and I, you're the best, and we really appreciate every one of you. So that's been our pleasure. Take care.